Herzlich willkommen zum heutigen Video. Ich bin Dr. Julian Hosp und heute haben wir ein ziemlich cooles Interview, nämlich mit dem Gründer von Bitcoin Suisse, Niklas Nikolajsen. Das Interview wird auf Englisch sein, weil Niklas nur Englisch kann, allerdings, weil er aus Dänemark ist. Allerdings sage ich dir, das solltest du dir unbedingt anhören, auch wenn vielleicht dein Englisch nicht ganz so gut ist. Wir sprechen über seine frühen Anfänge von 2010. Das muss man mir vorstellen. Dann spricht er darüber, wie viele Bitcoins er damals zu welchem Preis gekauft hat. Und ich kann dir schon mal sowas sagen, das war unter $1 das Bitcoin. Und dann quatschen wir da mal drüber. Wir sprechen darüber, wie er zurzeit den Markt sieht, wie er den nächsten Hype-Cycle sieht, was bei Bitcoin Suisse generell auch angeboten wird, warum er das Ganze gestartet hat und vielleicht auch, warum er als Anti-Establishment doch in diese Richtung hineingeht, dass er sagt, ich mache eine Bank in der Schweiz. Zum Schluss gibt er auch noch ein paar Preisprognosen zu Bitcoin und die sind ziemlich out of this world. Da kann sich schon mal freuen. Mit dem, ich wünsche dir ganz viel Spaß mit diesem weitreichenden Gespräch mit Niklas. Great. Niklas, such a pleasure to have you on. Where am I reaching you right now? Are you in Denmark? Are you in Switzerland? Where are you?
I'm in Switzerland in my home office. I was this weekend at a small pre-wedding celebration, and then we have quite strict quarantine rules when you get back. But I should receive my test result later today, and then hopefully I can return to the office, the real office, that is.
Fingers crossed, yeah. That's great. Hey, before we talk a bit about business and Bitcoin Suisse and what's happening, I would love to kind of figure out, how did you learn about Bitcoin in the first place? I think you were really, really early as far as I remember, right? Close to 10 years ago now.
Yes, it is. It was in mid 2010, so it's actually more than 10 years ago, 10 years and a month or so. Mm-hmm. At that point, Bitcoin was something you learned about in a series of internet forums, and inside of the cypherpunk movement, which was a group of idealists that were exploring technology as a means to deal with these centralized systems that we have and that are prone to failure. And I didn't really, I knew people were talking about Bitcoin in there, but I wasn't reading the white paper for a couple of months. Then one of my friends forced me to do it and said, this is really, really interesting. And once I did, of course, there were no way back.
And who was the person that you got most of the information? Because back then, a lot of the Bitcoin stuff actually happened in Finland, right? So I'm not sure if there's any connection there, or who were the people who introduced you to Bitcoin?
That was a friend in Copenhagen, a quite tech savvy friend, and who, like me, had not the greatest impression of the existing financial system. Mm-hmm. So we were both a little bit skeptical about the way things were going, and I had worked in banking for many years. And how do I say this in a nice way? I saw room for improvement. Mm-hmm. So when Bitcoin came along, it was quite obvious, first to my friend and then to me, that this was probably a solution to a lot of problems that are plaguing the world. At the time, however, I saw most of the Bitcoin action taking place not in Finland but in San Francisco.
Really?
That's where I believe Bitcoin was born, and that was also where you saw the first rudimentary exchanges and so forth. Later, it moved to New York, and from New York it spread across the world, and also to Switzerland.
And what do you think at the beginning caught you? Because there's many people like myself. So I learned about Bitcoin in 2011, but I wrote it off as one of those internet scams. But then some people, they saw something that, convinced them that this was legit. And it took me until 2014 until I learned about Bitcoin properly. So what do you think, what was the special thing in 2010?
Now, when I was young, I lived several years in Africa, in different countries, both in West and East Africa. And through that, I learned a healthy amount of skepticism towards authority, because it was pretty clear to me already at a tender young age of 5 or 6 years that just because people wear a uniform and have a nice title, they are not always all they say they are in terms of solving your problems and give me the power and then I will make a due for you. So as I returned to Europe and started to become interested in the software world, and the internet came around, and worked as a software architect, this feeling still sat in me that most of the big human disasters on record came from large centralized systems, be it the communist systems or the Stalins or the Hitlers, or to many regard also the controllers of the financial systems, the kings, the emperors, the Napoleons, the Genghis Khans. All of these were hierarchical human controlled centralized power structures that unleashed a lot of devastation upon the world. And when I graduated and started working in the banking world, it was in the world of banking and finances. This didn't make me any more enthusiastic about these big human-controlled centralized power systems and what they do for the world in terms of war, inflation, power centralization, fat cats surviving on the backs of others, and so forth. But the holy grail for us who thought this way, the libertarians, the cypherpunks, was how would you actually manage to do a decentralized but still electronic monetary system that could offer transparency, that could go peer-to-peer without a central authority. And being a software architect, when I read the Bitcoin white paper, which included the base principles of Bitcoin inside itself, and even snippets of code of how this could actually work, and then the revolutionary new system of crypto economics, aka incentivization directly from those who participate in the system. Yeah, it was clear for me within the first 5 pages that this was probably going to work. This was the holy grail. This was the solution to the Byzantine generals problem. This was the first real attempt to create data that only one person can own in a non-centralized manner. And it is such that with centralization of ledgers, which is what we have in the banking world, we need these gatekeepers, because if you can type in whatever you want in your bank account, then of course we would very quickly have inflation all over the world. But how that we could so elegantly disintermediate the central gatekeepers and create something like Bitcoin, that was so revolutionary that when I read the white paper, I felt this black hole opening and I was just sucked in, and I never looked back.
Did you see it? One thing that's always interesting to me is, because for me very early, I saw Bitcoin never as this payment method. I know that most people actually saw it back then, but for me very early, it was more of this digital crypto asset. I saw very early more the gold aspect, maybe because I wasn't visionary enough, right, to see what was possible. How did you see this at the beginning? Were you more on this currency, on this peer-to-peer cash system straight away, or how did this change maybe today? Do you see Bitcoin more as digital gold, or do you still see it as a possible actually replacement to the dollar, not so much as a complementary system, let's say, to gold?
Now the white paper outlined both, right? Bitcoin is both a unit of account or a currency, which can act as a store of value, arguably a very volatile one, but still a store of value. And at the same time, it's also a payment system. And even beyond that, potentially a system on which you can execute contracts, a role that is expanded upon greatly by the Ethereum protocol. Having a non or a predictable inflation-based unit of account with a ever-regressing inflation base, incentivizing the users through crypto economics or the payment of mining or staking rewards, and being able to transact peer-to-peer directly on common principles of asynchronous encryption. I saw it as all of the above. Today, however, it's clear that from what we know, Bitcoin will probably never be in itself on the block the unit of count we used to pay a cup of coffee. Some other protocols are experimenting being exactly that by having vastly bigger block sizes. Nevertheless, I do believe that one day you will absolutely be paying with Bitcoin when you buy a cup of coffee. I just don't think that it will necessarily be the microtransactions that go directly on the blockchain itself. These will be aggregated by payment providers, and then settlements will be done on the blockchain. And Bitcoin will very much be a digital gold. It's not a digital gold today. It's too small. It's too volatile. It's too unpredictable. But once Bitcoin has a $1 trillion market cap, and it will have, believe me, then Bitcoin will start serving exactly the same role. The undeniably best and most secure store of assets in human history, which has the flexibility to also transact across the world in a very safe way in less than 10 minutes.
And then how did it progress from there? I know in 2013, right, you started Bitcoin Suisse, but so what happened in those 3 years? Did you get involved in Bitcoin? Did you invest your own money? Did you mine it? What was the progression during those 3 years?
After I became aware that Bitcoin was out there, I take very care not to say after I discovered Bitcoin, because then it sounds like I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. After I discovered that somebody had invented Bitcoin, I became a local, a Danish Bitcoin evangelist. I did invest through 2010 and early 11, everything I owned in Bitcoin.
Wow.
But everything I owned amounted to a modest $1,000. But hey, it was still a lot of Bitcoin.
2010, it was sub $1. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the $1 party, the first time Bitcoin reached $1 was in February 2011.
Yep, that's when I learned about it. So that's why I know that exact.
And the pizza transaction, that was around October 2010, you know, the first Bitcoin for value transaction, 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas. So Bitcoin had actually no real value when I first discovered Bitcoin. There weren't exchanges, there weren't marketplaces, and Bitcoin was something we sent to each other in the community. When somebody new joined, he would get a 50 or 100 Bitcoin from someone to play with. And I do believe a lot of those Bitcoins from 2009 and 10, they are no longer accessible to anyone because we didn't take much care. Only towards the end of 2010 did Bitcoin get a real value, and we saw Trade Hill coming, later Mt. Gox, these first exchanges that turned out to be very rudimentary in their functions and their control systems. But after evangelizing Bitcoin, I went to the management of the software consultancy where I worked and said, we have to rethink what we're doing. Why are we doing the intranet of corporations and their web pages and their silly, when we can be changing the world? We need to work with Bitcoin. That didn't really work well. And I was sent back to my desk and asked to just keep doing what I was told. And then I decided that that wasn't gonna work for me. I wanted to work with Bitcoin, and given that there were no companies in the Bitcoin space at the time, that meant that I had to form one. And Denmark isn't the most friendly place to entrepreneurs. If you succeed, you will have to hand over most of your success to the government. and if you fail, you will have to pay it all yourself. So you have all of the downside and very little of the upside. Also, the Danish financial regulators are not known to be very open to non-bank financial activities. And I didn't have the cash to start a bank, right? That would have required $100 million, and I had maybe a few $100s. So I decided to go somewhere where a fintech would be more possible than in Denmark. And I looked at the world, I looked at the city of London, I looked at Singapore, I looked at Dubai, I looked at Canada, and I looked at a lot of places, but at the end I selected Switzerland. I would go to Switzerland with my dream of building a Bitcoin financial service provider, bank, and later exchange. I was pretty confident that that was gonna work, even though I didn't know the country. And I chose Switzerland because Switzerland has a history of decentralization, a history of private money, access to the European market, highly skilled workforce, geopolitically stable, all of the right components that that I thought it would take. Other jurisdictions, let's say Singapore, would have the same, but that's not really a democracy, right? So the settlement changes with the flavor of the rulers, and I didn't want to live such a place. And I also wanted to live a place where you could raise a family and where people played on the street. And Singapore is, of course, a huge metropole, and maybe not the best place to set up shop, unless, of course, you're young and enjoy the nightlife and such. But anyways, I chose Switzerland. I moved there. I got a job working at the biggest Swiss bank at the time, Credit Suisse. And after some time there, I pitched internally in Credit Suisse that wealth management should consider adding Bitcoin as an asset class.
What year was that? What year was that?
That was 2012.
Okay, wow.
Now I've been in Switzerland for some time, preaching Bitcoin inside Credit Suisse. And then I pitched my ideas to senior management and was told that this had no interest for the bank. The pitch, by the way, was called Bitcoin Suisse, as in Credit Suisse. And then I was disappointed. I went back to my seat. I continued my work a few days, but then several people who attended that meeting came to my desk and said, "Greatest pitch ever, but it will never sit with the bank, but we will fund you if you go and do exactly what you said the bank should do, but do it yourself." And that took half a day of thinking, and then I was out of there. And then we set up Bitcoin Suisse, and that's now 7.5 years ago. And I guess the rest is history. Today we are, with some margin, the biggest crypto financial service provider in Europe.
Wow. And now I need to ask, obviously, you being that of a cypherpunk anti-regulation, and now you go the banking route, right? So how do you unify that with your own values? So how do you unify that with your own belief system? It's a question that I get asked as well from a lot of people, because I'm such a proponent of decentralization and freedom. And then I have a company that, I don't know, also obviously is a centralized company.
Yes. I'm not anti-regulation. I am anti-regulation that acts as impediment to some and a huge windfall to others. I'm against regulatory capture. I'm against crony capitalism. But I do not believe we should have a society where there are no rules. It shouldn't never be okay for you to shoot me in the face. However, the only way we had to do this in the old days was appointing kings and czars and people who could have the ultimate power to bonk you in the head and make you follow certain rules. And unfortunately, all of these kings and czars and dukes and They were humans, right? So 1, 2, 3, once they were in control, their house started looking a little bit nicer than your house. And you would end up paying taxes to them, and they were, and it's the same today, right? Now we might have a democracy, but we still have a political elite, and they have friends, and they get the best government contracts, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. However, we never had a better system, and like Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst system, except all other systems that we have tried.
Mm.
But with the advent of crypto technology and decentralized systems like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, we actually do have another system, one that doesn't need for you to sign over all your power to somebody who arguably then are to make sure that everything goes on fair. We have a mechanism to ensure it. And that kind of regulation transparency that comes with crypto is far, far, far superior to, let's say, the financial authority of XYZ country, which is at the end of the day made up by human beings. And human beings are, my friend, very fallible. Even some of the biggest idols of the world have dark sides as well. We are probably all at some point going to be cancelled, right? Because nobody is perfect. But technology can be perfect. And this kind of regulation is the ultimate regulation. And that's what I believe in. I do not believe that we should have kings and czars because I've seen what comes along with that. But I do not think that now that I reach out to the hand, or Bitcoin Suisse reaches out to become a licensed Swiss and Liechtensteinian bank, that we're doing any sellout. We're doing what is necessary under the current rules and regime for us to hold large amount of client funds, because that's considered banking. If you hold client deposits above 20 in Switzerland, then you are doing banking and you need a banking license, unless, of course, you guarantee all deposits 100% with a default banking guarantee. Now, and that's what we do at Bitcoin Suisse, because we are not a bank yet. But when our capital requirements are 101%, and the capital requirements of a bank is between 5 and 15%, then it's very clear that it's a matter of time before other people would be able to do what we do 6 to 7 times cheaper. So if we do not prepare to be a bank, then eventually we will be outcompeted by banks. Secondly, the dealing of securities. More and more crypto assets are considered securities, including a great number of the stable coins, which are, of course, the enabler to the ultimate holy grail of the decentralized financial services. If these are considered securities, you have to have a securities dealer license, which is part also of being a bank. So we're doing what we must for the good of the company, for the good of the crypto economy, us serving as one of the major interfaces between fiat and crypto and vice versa. But if everything goes as I would expect, then in 10 years' time, we would gently hand back the banking licenses, because they would serve no purpose anymore, because most of our services as well would be decentralized and living on the blockchain. But there are some years still for that. So not a sellout, just taking the burden of appeasing the regulators on my shoulders to ensure that hundreds of thousands of Europeans don't have to do it.
Okay, makes sense. And then what's your business model, first of all, at Bitcoin Suisse? And then how was the decision made that you go mostly for institutional clients? Because I mean, most companies, especially in 2013, most of them went actually more B2C to end users, and you obviously took a different route. And I would love to understand, how did that decision making happen?
Today, Bitcoin Suisse operates in the, let's say, large client and mid-client space, and is growing into the retail space, which is very opposed to, let's say, similar companies like Coinbase and Bitpanda, who come very much from the retail space and are trying to grow up to the high net worth institutional space. So we come top down and they come bottom up in a sense when it comes to the size of clients, not the number of clients, but the size of clients. There, we traditionally had large clients and fewer of them, and our direct friendly competitors had smaller clients and a lot of them. Why that happened to us was that when we grew the company, we did not start with a lot of investment. So we had to do a lot of the work we did, and what services we offer I can mention in a moment. We had to do that quite manually. Of course, we had IT systems, but we had to do it quite manually. But one of our strengths were the very broad base of very skilled and very into crypto since the early day group of relationship managers. And thus we grew a traditional relationship-based business for large clients, able to handle large amounts. And for many years, we were the only company where you could confidently call and say, I need $15 million in Bitcoin, or I need $15 million and I have Bitcoin. That was not possible at Coinbase or any of the other people who operate in the space, because these large amounts, they of course require a little more than an automated system, right? They require that you really understand the client, that you can make the banks involved confident, that there's proof of the origin of the funds and control of the funds and so forth and so forth. So that was how we started up, really as an old school, very hands-on brokerage with personal relations. But from there, we did grow Bitcoin Suisse into very much of a retail business. So today, you do not have to be a large high net worth or institutional client to work with us. We certainly also have a retail offering that has exactly the same, and in some cases more advanced services than you can also see on Coinbase. So you can, but still, key revenue driver at Bitcoin Suisse is the large clients. You, however, call them the institutional clients. I wouldn't call it institutional clients as such. The institutional engagement in the crypto space as of today, and I'm not only talking in our client base, but across the space, is very, very, very small. We have tens of thousands of clients at Bitcoin Suisse, if not hundreds and thousands. And of these, I would say there are maybe 15 banks, maybe 60 family offices, maybe 20 foundations, maybe, and if you add it all up, you would come to less than 100 institutional clients.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because crypto is and Bitcoin is still in a very early phase. It has none of the services available, none of the that institutional clients would require. There are not enough regulated custodians. There are not enough approved and regulated services for, let's say, a pension fund or a large bank to consider going into Bitcoin. And then the market is simply too small. It's not very interesting for a large commercial bank to engage in a $200 billion market cap space. It's just not. It will be. And we saw in 2017 where it was a $500 billion market cap. We saw the announcement from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan saying, oh, we are making crypto trade desk, we're coming, we're taking this seriously. Jamie Dimon was out and saying, oh, I said some bad things about Bitcoin 6 months ago. I didn't mean it at all. Now we want to do the Bitcoin business. But then we had the correction, and then you heard only crickets from the institutional space. And I would, if you are a client out there and you are approached by a broker or crypto financial service provider saying, oh, we are the one doing all of the institutional business, then run, because it's not there and they're lying, right? But at Bitcoin Suisse, we do have a tremendous amount of high net worth individuals, both those that were high net worth when they approached us in the first place, but certainly even more who have become high net worth individuals. I myself being one of them, right? We opened up large scale for clients in 2013 and 14. And when we started Bitcoin Suisse, I think Bitcoin was $15. You can imagine that the people who invested even a few $1,000s at that time today, of course, are tremendously wealthy. And some of them have grown their portfolios into hundreds of millions of dollars, not some, many. And even a few billionaires are there as well. And these have been key drivers in our business, along with the foundations and companies that work inside crypto. I can, of course, not talk much about our clients, but some of them make it very public. And there I can say that, of course, we work with the Ethereum Foundation, the Tezos Foundation, Consensus, and all of these, not all of them, but most of these large actors in the space, and of course also the exchanges, and to some extent also our competitors in the space. So, and these are the key drivers, not the banks, not the funds, not the hedge funds, not the family offices. What we see there is movement, but it is small. And we are not alone in that interpretation. That's just how the market is. Will it change? Absolutely. When Bitcoin reaches $500 billion, everybody will pile in, and 1, 2, 3, it will be a multi-trillion-dollar market. Of this, I have absolutely no doubt, and the interest is there. And we saw it already in 2017 that even large banks were about to jump on board, and so will they again once the market is large enough.
What do you think? What will this next hype cycle look like on the media exposure? Because I mean, I can compare it to 2014. I saw the hype cycle there, then 2017. So if I just kind of start charting this, like 2000, let's say 21 must be, I don't know, the central bank, European central bank announcing that they're going to buy Bitcoin as a backup, like they're buying gold. How do you envision that next hype cycle from a media story, from like the public perception?
So the next hype or bubble, if you call it that, Bitcoin being very cyclic, will be the one that will once and for all settle Bitcoin as an asset class to stay for the generations. After that cycle, there will be no talk anymore of Bitcoin being some way unclean, only for crazy people, all of that. It will be settled. Everyone after the next cycle will know about Bitcoin, and a lot of people will start owning Bitcoin either directly or through their pension fund, or through their bank, or through their savings account. Banks across Europe, all banks will have a Bitcoin offering, Bitcoin storage, Bitcoin savings account, things like that. The clients will demand it. Maybe some retail banks won't, but certainly behind the scenes, everybody will. Pension funds will start adopting Bitcoin. And then the Holy Grail, as you mentioned it yourself, probably at some point, maybe not this next cycle, maybe not in 2021, but within 5 or 6 or 7 years, central banks will also hold small reserves in Bitcoin. And all of them, more or less, will within 10 years have a blockchain-based version of their own fiat currencies. The dollar, the renminbi, the Swiss franc, all of these will be on the blockchain, absolutely guaranteed. But Bitcoin will be the ultimate settlement means between these power blocks in the world who do not also trust each other. I mean, the Chinese are not terribly happy about the dollar, right? And you are not going to go far with the renminbi in the US, and nobody wants the ruble. And I mean, but I think everybody will agree on that Bitcoin will be the settlement of choice between the power blocks of the world. It will be very large in trade financing, and it will play a part of everyone's life, but without that they need to go and buy their coffee with Bitcoin. I think that will happen as well over time, but I think much more that it will creep into people's lives in a subtle manner by their pension fund accepting Bitcoin, their insurance company starting to use Bitcoin as a means of settlement, the plastic shit they buy being imported by companies who paid a company in China by Bitcoin. This way it will get into our lives like all the other huge innovations that are all around us in our lives, but that we never think about. Plastic, penicillin, the combustion engine. We're not thinking about these things. We just take them for granted, and the same will be the case with Bitcoin. And you might continue to pay in a dollar or a Swiss franc or euro. But at the end of the day, one day, the value of that currency will be determined in, hey, how large are your Bitcoin reserves? We do not believe in a currency that has nothing backing it. We want to see it backed with something hard and physical, which Bitcoin is, physical and hard, very much so, even more so than gold. And it will simply be a demand. Currencies that central banks that have no reserves except crappy bonds and crappy equities, and their currencies will not stand the test of time. It will simply be a demand. So that's how it will happen. The next cycle will not be the final one.
Oh, really? So you think that there's going to be a back again, and then it's going to pick up again?
There will be one more correction after the next cycle, I predict. But I do not think that correction will take Bitcoin below $500 billion market cap. So we're going to see the next cycle send Bitcoin to a multi-trillion market cap, probably 1, 2, maybe even 3. And then we are going to probably go back to $500 billion.
So around, what will be the bottom then, right? So it would be like 25,000 as a bottom.
Yeah,
30,000.
So. It's a guess. I can't say for sure.
Sure. I mean, it's no one knows the future.
The next bottom will be way above the level that is required for institutional engagement, and they will come. And it will probably, after the next big correction, let's say it happens in 2022, after a new all-time high, which I predict in 2021, you are going to see a more stable growth in Bitcoin, and you're probably never going to revisit these large corrections, because once the market becomes sufficiently big, then of course it takes a lot of effort to inflate and deflate it. And will Bitcoin be $100,000 a day? Yeah, absolutely. Will it be in our lifetime? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to be in 10 years? Absolutely, way before that.
Do you buy into the stock to flow model that a lot of people discuss from Plan B, or how do you, where do those numbers come from that you kind of threw around here? Are these throwing darts into the dark, or where does this analysis come from?
It comes from 10 years of experience with the Bitcoin market and seeing the cycles repeat. They typically go like this. Bitcoin is trading flat, nothing much is happening. Then Bitcoin starts to rise modestly for half a year. Then it starts to rise more and more steeply. And then at the end of days, you see Bitcoin going absolutely vertical until some people start selling. Some people saying, hey, wait a moment, can it not only go up? And then you have a correction. And then you have a downslope, often lasting a full year. And then Bitcoin starts to pick up, and then it repeats and repeats. The end of 2013 was such a hype. 2013 itself saw Bitcoin go from $15 to $1,000. And then 14 and 15, you saw the big correction, sending Bitcoin down to a low of $180. And then Bitcoin started picking up again. You had a full year of Bitcoin at around $500, and it came back to 1,000, and then it went to 20,000 at the end of 17, and then in 18 you saw the big correction, and it sent Bitcoin all the way down to $3,800, and then it picked up, and here we are today on the nice slope towards the next high. We are not in the bubble yet, but one day we will be there. It's very easy to see when we are there. Within a few months, it's an expectation that Bitcoin is rising $300, $500 a day. Then it will be $1,000 a day, and towards the end of the hype, probably $5,000, $7,000, or $10,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at these cycles, you will see that it is very, very common that Bitcoin over a short time does a 20x, a short time like a year or a year and a half, 20, 30, or even 40x from the base. Let's say we had the $20 of the 2017, they became $1,000, that's a 50x. And afterwards, in the large correction, you get back to between 5 and 10 times before the large bubble. So you never go back below before the bubble started. You end on a much higher level. And then again in 2017, the real hype started from $1,000 up to 20. So it did a 20x. And then the collapse took it back to 3,800. So we ended at a 4 or 5 times before and I predict we will see the same again. Each cycle that has happened in Bitcoin, and there's been like 5 or 6 of these, sends Bitcoin up slightly less than the previous cycle, and the correction is slightly less bad. So let's assume that the next cycle is going to take us up at a factor of 8 to 10 from today. So around $80,000, $100,000. And then it's going to send us back to 3, 4, 5 times before the start. So back to another 25, 35, maybe 45. That is what I predict. And I predict it from looking at the past. However, if Bitcoin is to find a role as a store of value and means of transaction in any notable fashion, then you can start playing around with some really funny numbers. What's going to happen when you stuff $10 trillion into a limited 20 million coin supply, right? Then you get some really interesting numbers. And I'm absolutely confident that some of these numbers will materialize one day. So I put a small part of my personal savings into Bitcoin, and I advise everyone else to do the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's difficult to say how much you should put into Bitcoin, but there's one false amount, and that's 0. So that's the one you should definitely not put in.
And
great.
also, I've been saving in Bitcoin for 10 years, and it's worked out well for me.
Is it public, or do you share public how much you have in Bitcoin? Is it public, or do you share how much you have in Bitcoin?
Well, it's commonly known that I bought 1,000 Bitcoin for $800 in the end of 2010, and that I still hold these Bitcoin. So it's above 1,000.
Okay.
But besides that, it's between me and the Swiss tax authorities, right? So
fair enough. No, sure, fair enough. I want to shoot a couple of rapid fire questions here at the end. Yeah, I guess one that I guess everyone always wants to know: who do you think Satoshi is?
I cannot say for sure. But I think Satoshi was a group of 3 persons who lived in San Francisco, of which one died some years ago, and the 2 others are still alive. I think that statement, then people can take it from there to Google, and they will quickly find out what I think. It fits very much with...
like, who are you talking about there?
What?
Who are you talking about there?
Well, Finn Hanley would be one of them. And the 2 others I will leave for people to guess, because I don't want to say any names. Finn is dead now, but the 2 others are alive, and I'm not going to be the one who sends the press to their door by announcing that they are potentially Satoshi. But I think it's more than one person. different writing styles, different times he was awake, and there are some incidents that if Satoshi is really only one person, then he would have to have stayed more or less awake for 2 days straight, which indicate that when one was sleeping, another was working. Then there are all the early mined coins of Satoshi indicate also that these are probably lost, which could very well much more happen in a confederation of people than a single person. And then there were the different ideas that Bitcoin is made up of, coming from different sources, probably being put together by 2 and possibly 3 smart minds, different writing styles in English, different. Yeah, that's what I think, and I know for sure that it all happened in San Francisco. That's
Really?
that's no doubt in my mind. Everybody who was early in the space were running around in San Francisco. So one more for the Silicon Valley gang. They've brought a lot of invention to the world. What I do not believe is that it has anything to do with Japan, even though the name is, of course. And what a wonderful invention. And as many people say, it doesn't really matter who brought it to light, because it validates itself. It's by now an institution, and will be recognized as one of the great inventions in humankind and all of our history. But that's what I think.
Okay.
Next one.
Interesting. Which other coins? I mean, your company is called Bitcoin Suisse, but which other coins do you pay attention to? Yeah, do you look out to? What interests you?
Yeah, we are called Bitcoin Suisse because we are back from the day where there were only Bitcoin. But of course, we trade and provide services in a wide area of coins and assets. I think 144 listings we have currently. Just like Goldman Sachs trades other things than gold, we trade other things than Bitcoin. The service we provide are, we operate a trading platform, a brokerage platform. We provide private brokerage, we provide credit and lending. We provide staking services. We provide custody, of course. Custody is very important. And most of the activity, when you measure our turnover and revenues, come from the operations that involve primarily Bitcoin and the Bitcoin forks, the 2 dominant Bitcoin forks, and Ethereum. If you are to mention the next group of crypto assets that we feel might be important and that has an impact on our business, that would be assets such as Tezos, Polkadot, Cardano, to mention a few. And there's probably, I would say, another handful of around 5 or 7 coins, but I'm reluctant to mention them because it's very speculative, and people might take this as a financial advice. I do not believe that as smart contract platforms and as payment systems and as stores of values, that there will be much more than 10 different protocols around in the future. However, there will be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different crypto assets symbolizing debt and bonds and equities and so forth and so forth. But the pure smart contract platform / stores of value and payment systems, it's going to be a maximum of 2 handfuls.
Very interesting. Okay. Last question from my side. What do you think is the necessary thought process that a no-coiner has to undergo in order to become a Bitcoiner?
What triggered the original Bitcoiners, Satoshi himself and all of the early joiners, myself included, was a skepticism of where the world was going, and especially maybe the financial systems. And you saw many of the early Bitcoiners being these a little bit anti-establishment, free market, libertarian, even anarcho-capitalists really engaging into the space. What people need to be today to be a Bitcoiner? Well, if you are definitely and surely in the camp that Bitcoin is an unnecessary complication of your life or something that is only used to buy marijuana cigarettes on the internet, then you are never going to adapt Bitcoin directly, right? Then it's going to come in through the back door, through your pension fund, through your insurances, through trade financing and so forth. For all the rest of us, well, the Bitcoiners that are coming in are the people who are open-minded, who are interested, who are, let's say, a little bit skeptical of these centralized power structures, and the investment-savvy people who smell that here something is happening, the smart money, and all the rest of the world will be eventually convinced through Bitcoin being all around them. Just as I'm sure that there were 100 years ago some people saying, no, I don't want any plastic in my house, it has to be all wood. But in the end, of course, it also and I have no fear of this. I don't think we need to do more missionary style work for this. Bitcoin is on a roll and Bitcoin is unstoppable. And if I were to get $1,000 and were told I have to buy something now and then take a time machine for 100 years, and at the other end of the time machine I can pick up whatever I bought, I wouldn't buy Tesla shares, right? I wouldn't buy US government bonds. I wouldn't buy cash. I would probably buy for $15 of gold and $85 of Bitcoin, and then I would take the time machine, and I would be pretty confident that on the other end something nice would be awaiting for me.
Cool. That's a nice finish to this. Niklas, other than Bitcoin Suisse, what else can they check out? Do you have a Twitter account, or what's the best place to follow you, or where would you love to kind of guide people off after the video?
At bitcoinswiss.com, you see all of our services and all of our news and everything related to the company. I have a Facebook account that you are welcome to follow, but it's non-business, right? It's about my life, but it's an interesting life, so there might be something there to follow as well. And then on Twitter and Instagram, I do believe marketing echoes many of the things that I put on Facebook or that the company puts on its news page.
Cool. I love that. So we'll definitely link this up. Niklas, thank you so much for your time. It was a very insightful chat. Very, very nice. Thanks so much for that.
I enjoyed it as well, sir. And have a good day.
Thank you. You too.